In May of 1967, the Middle East stood on a knife's edge. A storm of rhetoric and military mobilization was gathering, threatening to engulf the region in flames. From Cairo, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser's voice thundered across the Arab world, promising a final, decisive battle against Israel. The world watched, bracing for a war that seemed not just likely, but inevitable. The evidence was overwhelming. Nasser amassed over 100,000 troops and 1,000 tanks in the Sinai Desert, directly on Israel's border. He expelled the UN peacekeeping forces that had separated the two nations for a decade. Then, in a move that was a clear casus belli, he closed the Straits of Tiran, choking off Israel's vital maritime access to the Red Sea. The blockade was an act of war. Israel was surrounded, outnumbered, and its very existence hung in the balance. Yet, to the outside world, Israel projected an image of eerie calm. While its political leaders debated frantically behind closed doors, its beaches remained open. Photographs sent across the globe showed a nation seemingly at peace. Its soldiers on leave, its citizens enjoying the late spring sun. This was not weakness, it was a mask. A deliberate, calculated strategy of deception, orchestrated by a mind that saw the battlefield in a different light. On June 1st, a new figure stepped into the heart of Israel's defense establishment. The iconic one-eyed general, Moshe Dayan. As the new Minister of Defense, Dayan understood that the coming war would be fought not only with tanks and planes, but with perception. He amplified the deception, ensuring Israel appeared hesitant, reluctant to fight, and diplomatically isolated. It was a performance designed to lull his enemies into overconfidence and to ensure that when Israel finally did strike, it would be seen not as an aggressor, but as a nation fighting for its very survival. As the world slept, believing peace still had a chance, Dayan's plan was already in motion. The calm was about to break. At dawn on June 5, 1967, the time for deception was over. As the world still debated peace, Israel's pilots climbed into their cockpits. The survival of the nation now rested on the success of one of the most audacious and risky military operations ever conceived. Operation Focus. The objective was not just to fight, but to win the war before it had truly begun. The plan, years in the making and drilled to perfection, was deceptively simple. Destroy the entire Egyptian Air Force while it was still on the ground. To do this, the Israeli Air Force would have to fly in complete radio silence, at altitudes as low as 30 meters. Approaching their targets from the west over, the Mediterranean where Egyptian defenses were least expecting an attack. The timing was critical. The first wave would strike at precisely 7:45 a.m. The moment Egyptian commanders changed shifts and their pilots were enjoying a morning coffee, their guard completely down. The gamble was immense. If they were detected even minutes too early, the plan would fail, and Israel's planes would be met by a prepared and superior force. But they weren't. As Israeli mirages and misters roared over the horizon, they found the Egyptian airfields exactly as their intelligence had predicted. The enemy's formidable fleet of Soviet-made aircraft sat parked in neat rows, helpless. The first bombs didn't target the planes, but the runways, cratering the asphalt and trapping them on the ground. With nowhere to escape, the jets became sitting ducks. Within hours, the first wave was over, and the results were staggering. A second and third wave followed, targeting the remaining bases across Egypt and the Sinai. In less than 3 hours, over 300 Egyptian aircraft were reduced to smoldering wreckage. The largest and most modern air force in the Arab world had been annihilated without ever getting the chance to fight. From his command bunker, Moshe Dayan received the news. Israel now had total control of the sky. With the aerial threat eliminated, the path was clear for the ground invasion. The Sinai Blitz was about to begin. With the skies belonging to Israel, Moshe Dayan unleashed his armored fist. On the morning of June 5th, 3 Israeli divisions, a torrent of steel and fire, crashed into the Sinai Peninsula. This was not a cautious advance. It was a blitzkrieg, a lightning war designed to shatter the Egyptian army before it could mount a coherent defense. The plan was a symphony of violence, with each division playing a critical part. In the north, General Israel Tal's division drove hard and fast along the coast. In the south, General Abraham Yoff's forces executed a wide flanking maneuver to block reinforcements and seal off any escape. But the key to the entire campaign lay in the center, with the formidable task assigned to General Ariel Sharon to crack the heavily fortified crossroads at Abu. It was a complex of trenches, minefields, and deeply entrenched artillery, considered impregnable by the Egyptians. Sharon, however, did not play by conventional rules. As dusk fell, he unleashed a revolutionary strategy of combined arms. Helicopters ferried paratroopers deep behind enemy lines to destroy the artillery that could have decimated his tanks. He sent his infantry to clear the trenches on foot, while his engineers breached the minefields. Most audaciously, he sent a brigade of tanks through the soft sand dunes, a path deemed impassable, to strike the Egyptian flank. The enemy was hit simultaneously from the front, the rear, and the side. It was a masterful, chaotic, and brutally effective assault. By dawn, Abu Wajila had fallen, and with it, the entire Egyptian defensive line in the Sinai crumbled. The order from Cairo for a general retreat turned into a desperate rout. Trapped on open roads with no air cover, the retreating Egyptian army was decimated. In just over 2 days, Israeli forces had conquered the vast peninsula and stood victorious on the banks of the Suez Canal. The southern front was won. But the war was far from over. As victory was being secured in the desert, a frantic message reached command. Jordan had opened fire on Jerusalem. While Israel's armor conquered the Sinai, its leaders sent desperate, secret messages to their eastern neighbor. They pleaded with Jordan's king Hussein, "Stay out of the war." Israel had no designs on the West Bank or Jerusalem. But Hussein was caught in a political tidal wave. Buoyed by Nasser's false claims of Egyptian victories and pressured by Arab nationalism, he made a fateful decision. On June 5th, Jordanian artillery batteries opened a massive barrage on West Jerusalem. For Moshe Dayan, this was the front he never wanted. The political and religious implications of a battle for Jerusalem were enormous. But with Israeli civilians under fire, there was no choice. He authorized the counterattack, unleashing the elite 55th Paratroopers Brigade. What followed was not a war of open desert, but a brutal, grinding fight in the winding hills and streets of Judea. The battle for Ammunition Hill became a symbol of this new frontier night of savage, close-quarters combat that left deep scars on both sides. After 2 days of relentless fighting, the paratroopers had encircled the ancient, walled old city. Dayan, hesitant to use heavy weapons in such a sacred place, gave the final order. On the morning of June 7th, Israeli soldiers stormed through the Lion's Gate. They fought their way through the labyrinthine alleys, driven by a goal that transcended military strategy. Then, they reached it, the Western Wall, the last remnant of the Second Temple, the holiest site in Judaism. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, it was in Jewish hands. The tough, battle-hardened soldiers stood in stunned reverence, their raw emotion broadcast to a breathless nation. The symbolic heart of the war had been won. But in the north, another storm was gathering. Syrian guns, perched high on the Golan Heights, were raining fire down on the farms and villages below. With Egypt and Jordan defeated, only one front remained active. For years, the Syrian army had used the strategic advantage of the Golan Heights to terrorize the Israeli farms and villages. In the valley below, from a fortress of concrete bunkers and interlocking artillery positions, they could fire down with impunity. The Golan was a strategic nightmare, a dagger pointed at the heart of northern Israel. Yet, Moshe Dayan hesitated. The war was all but won. International pressure for a ceasefire was immense, and attacking Syria, a close ally of the Soviet Union, risked escalating the conflict into a global crisis. For 4 days, as Syrian shelling intensified, Dayan resisted the calls from his northern command to attack. He believed the political risk was too great. But the pleas from the northern settlements became impossible to ignore. Their lives had been a constant state of emergency for 2 decades. With the Arab armies collapsing on all other fronts, this was the moment to remove the threat once and for all. On the morning of June 9th, Dayan finally, and reluctantly, gave the green light. The order was given to one of Israel's most brilliant tactical commanders, David Elazar, to take the heights. The assault that followed was one of the most difficult in modern warfare. It was a near-vertical battle. Armored bulldozers, their drivers shielded by thick steel plates, clawed their way up the treacherous slopes, clearing paths for the tanks that followed. The Syrian defenders poured down a storm of fire from their fortified bunkers. It was a slow, grinding, and incredibly costly fight up the mountain. But by late afternoon, the impossible began to happen. The first Israeli units breached the defensive lines and reached the plateau. Once the Israeli armor was on level ground, the Syrian defenses, designed to repel an uphill attack, crumbled. The Syrian army fell into a disorganized retreat. In less than 2 days, Israel was in complete control of the strategic plateau. The Six-Day War was over. On June 10, 1967, the guns fell silent. In just 132 hours of fighting, the nation of Israel had not only survived, had redrawn the map of the Middle East. Its armies stood on the banks of the Suez Canal, on the shores of the Jordan River, and atop the strategic Golan Heights. The psychological impact was as immense as the territorial gains. For Israelis, it was a near miraculous victory, a deliverance. For the Arab world, it was the Naksa, the setback, a humiliating defeat whose shockwaves would be felt for generations. The world scrambled to respond. In the chambers of the United Nations, a new formula was born. UN Resolution 242. Its principle was simple, yet its implementation would prove almost impossible: land for peace. Israel was called upon to withdraw from the territories it had just captured in exchange for recognition and secure borders. This resolution would become the bedrock of every peace talk, every negotiation, and every future conflict for the next half-century and beyond. The war was over, but the struggle for the land had just begun. The Six-Day War, a conflict born from miscalculation, fear, and hubris, was a stunning military victory for Israel. But it created a new and deeply complex reality. It transformed Israel from a small nation fighting for survival into a regional superpower and an occupying force. It gave birth to the Palestinian Liberation Movement and ignited the debate over settlements that continues to this day. The 6 days of fighting in June 1967 did not end the story. They wrote the first chapter of the one we are still living in. The consequences of those 6 days are a testament to how history is forged in moments of intense conflict. To explore more pivotal events that have shaped our modern world, make sure to subscribe to Legacy Thread and join our community of history enthusiasts. Thank you for watching.